certain Uber drivers, they pull up to my house, they see I'm in a really big house, and they want to know about what I do. Mm-hmm. And I want to know about what they do. But then I'll have the occasional one where I'll ask them questions, and it's a 30-minute Uber ride. Let's say I'm going all the way downtown, and they won't stop talking about themselves, and they never want to ask me one question, which is fine. I'm interested in them. But I just think, here there's a potential for some back and forth. And I feel like, they might be interested in real estate or how to make money or how to invest or whatever. But no, certain people, they're not thinking about what I can learn from people. They just want to tell me about them, their last 4 jobs and why they got fired and they're driving an Uber, which is fine. But they would serve themselves well, and we all would if we just take time to be the question asker at the conferences and not the guy talking about everything he's always done. Don't be the guy or the girl that's always telling everybody else what they're doing, because you're not learning anything when you're doing that. Right.
All right. Welcome back to How to Invest in Commercial Real Estate. And today we're leaning in. We are leaning in today. So today is all about random people. Every now and then you're going to get approached by random people. You're going to have new people walk into your life. You're going to have somebody that's going to change your life forever. And you have a split decision that you have to make immediately. It's like, do I ignore them? Do I give them my worst self? Or do I lean in and say, hey, how are you? What's up? How can I help you today?
It goes along with the theme that we've been trying to convince people listening to this podcast for months now, is that you not only are one idea away, but you are one contact away from changing your life. And the thing is, if you don't believe that, you're not going to be looking for it. You're going to go about your day. And like I said right before the podcast, most people are too consumed with themselves, what they can offer, what they're doing, than to see the value that people can bring, that they're meeting day to day. And those people can change their lives. But if you're not thinking, hey, this person can change my life, well, then you may not give them the time or the consideration that you would have otherwise.
Yeah, it's like you kind of have to have that mindset all the time, right? It's like you said, a lot of people are just too busy. They don't want to mess with other people. So their mindset is when someone calls, they don't know them. No, I'm not going to do anything with this person. But if you have the mindset of, well, yeah, this person could actually have some influence and every meeting that you go with someone or phone call, it may not, turn into something, but every once in a while it will.
Yeah. And I think, now especially, I mean, our phone numbers are everywhere. We run businesses. We are meeting with people constantly. We have events. We're giving out business cards all the time. And I can't tell you how many times I don't have the number saved, so that's why I'm saying random. I don't have the number saved. People that I don't have the number saved call me more than people that I do have their number saved call me. And every single time I'm like, hello, this is Braden, and I smile and I act exciting. And every now and then, I had an investor call me a few weeks ago. Hey, I listened to your podcast and I'd love to learn more about what you do. And, I had that phone call and it wasn't necessarily the most convenient time for me. No, it was a sketchy reception when I first picked up. So it was kind of aggravating, when you pick up and you can't hear them, or it's like kicking over to Bluetooth and you're just like, well, you call me, man. What do you mean? Anyway, we get into the conversation. It's a great conversation. They'd listened to our podcast. Now they've invested with us, not once, but twice, I think.
Great.
And it's just crazy. And that wouldn't have happened unless I was just genuinely interested in what we're doing, which is why we're running the podcast. If you want to talk commercial real estate, you call me.
Well, and so we thought, okay, to emphasize the point, let's give some real world examples about particular people that we've met, phone calls that we took, emails that we received, where we followed up and they ended up having a big impact on our investing career or our lives or whatever. So,
yeah, I will start. My favorite building that I own, my absolute favorite building. I love telling the story too, because I get this call from this guy who I didn't know from Adam. His name was Neil. He's been on our podcast. His name's Neil Dailey. But Neil called me the first time I ever spoke to him, and he was trying to get a hold of you. And he couldn't get a hold of you, but I was answering your phone at the time.
I'm a busy guy.
So I'm like, hey, what's up, Neil? We're busy. He's like, well, I have this deal that's not even for sale. I'd like to sell it to you. And I mean, it was kind of a funny thing. It wasn't listed. It was this off-market deal. He said, hey, I think I've got a seller here. I'd love to sit down with coffee for you guys. Can you set me up a meeting with Joel? And again, this guy's I wasn't anybody. I was working for you. We set up the meeting, and sure enough, Joel goes to the wrong coffee shop.
I remember this.
Completely wrong coffee shop. So here I am, nobody sitting with Neil and his team about to sell me a property that's not even for sale. It's a great meeting so far. So every indicator is, why am I here? What am I doing? My boss isn't here. This property's not even for sale. Complete waste of time. But, being the good steward that I am, I sat there and I was excited, willing, eager, and tried to act like I was able to have that conversation. Sure enough, we get all the information. I bring it back, and I'm so excited. I'm like, hey, guys, this building's on Cherry Street. And Cherry Street is this super walkable, awesome part of town in Tulsa where
up
we
and
live.
coming.
Yeah,
at the time, it was
up and coming. Not necessarily, the spot yet, but it was on its way, and there were some new things kind of happening. And we dig into this deal, and I'm like, man, it's awesome. And Joel's first question, he said, what's the cap rate? And I'm like, well, it's like a 6.5. And he's like, no. Just immediately crumpled it up like, no, into the trash. And I was not going to have it. I was absolutely not going to have it. So I underwrote that thing like a son of a gun, and I built models and assumed things. And I called Neil, and I'm like, hey, man, this doesn't work. Something's got to give. The roof sucks. These tenants or whatever they are. I mean, it had a lot of problems. And it was just no. Finally, I can't remember what gave, but we got it up to like a 7.5 or an 8 cap, maybe at this point. So we got it in contract, and it was still like Joel's wanting to cancel this thing. It didn't make money on paper. It's probably not going to make money in real life. And we keep fighting. We get the deal closed. Finally, Joel and Precision have owned it for years. They bought it in 2019. I hate saying that. It was 2018. I thought it was 20. Anyway, they bought it in 2019. And that was when I met Neil. Now Neil and I still go to the same coffee shop, and we discuss business and real estate deals. Most of them aren't even for sale because that's what you do.
Well, and having the courage to pursue that meeting, even though you weren't necessarily ready for it, you weren't experienced enough for it, that caused you to go to the next step of listening to the deal. And then you had this deal that you brought to me, and I'm like, I'm not going to underwrite that. You underwrite it.
Yeah.
And so then it forced you to go through the steps of underwriting it. And how much did you learn from underwriting that? And it was the first deal you invested in.
Yeah.
And me, pushing back on all of the issues and the problems, and you having to find a workaround with the sellers. All that experience is really what prepared you to do the job you're doing now.
Yeah, and even more, the sellers of that building ended up investing with Criterion a decent amount of money, and they invested in our first 3 or 4 deals. He was a super nice guy that we still talk to. And again, wouldn't have had that building, wouldn't have had any of that knowledge or experience or those failures, to get to the success. I wouldn't have had any of that if I blew Neil off. I mean, that was it.
That's a great one. I'll go next. I have several. I'm trying just to pick on maybe 2 for this discussion. But one of them, I was working part-time as an apartment broker with Brandon Lamb. We've had him on the podcast in that group. And I'm sitting in this small office just kind of getting going and my feet wet in multifamily brokerage. And we owned apartments at the time. I get a cold call from a guy in Boston. He's a mortgage broker. And most of the time, people are blowing off mortgage brokers. But for me, I thought I'm going to take the call and see what's going on. So I took the time to listen to him.
Yeah, so a mortgage broker, they go out and they find a loan for your commercial property, and they charge you, 1 to 3 points or whatever it is.
Usually a point. But man, we hit it off. I went ahead and took the call. I gave him the time of day, and he's like, "Hey, let me help you underwrite deals. What do you have? Should we look at refinancing?" And that one phone call, he ended up doing a Fannie loan for us on an apartment building. That was great. And we actually pulled out a bunch of cash. And then we had a deal in Indianapolis, and he helped us underwrite that, refi that, helped us understand what the agencies were looking for during the refi and how we maximize our cash out position, which he was great at. I would have never known that much about agency debt. I mean, I think he was maybe the first. We had assumed a HUD loan before, but we had never gotten Fannie Freddie debt before. So here was my gateway into understanding agency debt, which is the gold standard for multifamily properties. And that was an area I wasn't familiar with yet. We had done bank debt.
So a similar situation to what Braden was going into, where he didn't really know everything about the subject, but you went in and that allowed you to learn about it.
Yeah,
right?
and so giving people the time of day, and he was able to educate me on an area of commercial real estate I didn't know. He was able to make money for himself by providing a service for me. But he was able to help Vic and I maximize our cash position and our debt position on multifamily assets that we owned because of his expertise. But it literally was a cold call. I didn't know him, hadn't met him. In fact, I didn't even meet him before we had done our first deal, over the phone.
Was it worth the fee?
Absolutely worth the fee. Absolutely worth the fee. I don't know if you can. It's hard to do an agency deal without paying a fee. Even if you go to an agency lender, they're going to charge you. So basically, he was charging a fee, but I would have had to pay that to anybody.
Yeah.
But a great example of every time you pick up the phone, instead of thinking to yourself, "Oh, I don't know this person. I'm busy." Ask yourself, okay, how can this person benefit me? What can I learn from this person? What knowledge do they have that I could learn?
Well, the guy that you talked to had to do that in his mind before he called you, right?
Yes.
It wasn't just you receiving it. It was he had to say, well, what can this guy? How can we work together? And he probably didn't want to make a bunch of cold calls that day.
No, I mean cold calls aren't easy.
Yeah.
So that was one. You got another one, or
Yeah, and through the process, I mean, everyone's got to do that. You're either on the receiving or the giving end of a cold call.
Yeah.
So if you've done cold calls, you're probably a nicer receiver of cold calls because you know how much they tend to suck. But I mean, when you're first starting out, and we've had these conversations and we've had these episodes, you have to cold call bankers. Hey, I'm nobody and I own no property and I want a real estate loan.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm nobody and I own no property and I want you to invest with me. You've got to be able to add value to people. Yeah, I do have another one. Another super influential person in my life in Criterion. This guy, he was almost a kid at the time. I mean, he's like the same age as me. We're a little young, and he called me and he said, "Hey, I see you guys are a commercial real estate company. I'm based in Dallas or Fort Worth or whatever it was, and there's this property in Norman that I think you should look at." And back then, we didn't do any joint ventures, and Precision didn't do any joint ventures at the time. So I'm like, I don't even think I returned this guy's phone call, which was really bad. But this guy, being amazing, he called me back again 6 months later, and he said, "Hey, this is so and so. Do you remember me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, so sorry about it." No, he's like, no, let me stop you right there. Are you sitting in front of a computer? Go to this website. And he's okay, auction10x.com. Okay. He said, "Do you remember the name of that property? It was so and so. Pull that up in the search bar," and I look it up, and it's going for auction. And I'm like, man, this seems expensive. I thought we could have bought this for like
$10 million,
or even less. And he's like, "Well, you could have. We think it's going to go for like $16 million. I wanted you to watch the auction."
Yeah.
The galls on this guy calling me back to let me suffer.
Unfortunately, I remember you talking to me about it, and we had just 1031'd a bunch of money into a deal in Vegas.
Yep.
And so the timing was just not good for us. And this was a pretty big deal for us at the time.
Yep.
Back then, $10 million would have been a big deal for us.
We didn't know these guys from Adam.
Didn't know him, and he's like, "Hey, this is a good value." It was kind of foreclosure type. It was receivership type retail.
Yeah.
Even though it was right on the highway in Norman, Oklahoma.
A new one was
near
built.
University of Oklahoma.
That one filled up, drained this one down of tenants. They had a very aggressive, practical leasing plan to get it back up to reality, which they did. They accomplished, and some other group ended up buying it. But anyway, we lost out on millions of dollars of lost opportunity because we couldn't build the relationship with him over the phone. And I said, his name is Andrew Thalen. He works for the Woodmont Company. We've since done 5 deals with him. We're about to close our 6th deal with him. And it's been an amazingly fruitful relationship because we both keep pouring into the relationship. We bring deals their way. They bring deals our way. We compare notes. We provide debt and equity, they're providing deals. And it's this amazing relationship because we fanned the flame and we grew it and we fed it. And now it's something, that's feeding us.
Yeah, just imagine how many calls Andy makes.
Too many.
To bunches of people that he doesn't have the relationship that he has with us. But because we fostered the relationship and we've committed to it and we've trusted them with our equity and our investors' equity, and it's returned well, now we're doing deals and we're both making money and adding value to each other, all because of an initial phone call.
Yep.
And putting the time in. And that's kind of what the show's about, is that once again, see people for what they can add to you. Don't be just so concerned about what you're doing. How can this person benefit me? What do they know that I don't know? What experience do they bring? I'll give one more example and then we can probably call it. But This is a recent example because I don't know if people listening to the podcast know, but we had our big downtown Bixby project announced on Monday. We're doing, it's going to be iconic Bixby. It's a mixed-use development in the heart of downtown Bixby, maybe the largest development in downtown Bixby's history.
We need to make sure to get a picture up on the screen for that.
Yeah, and that project is as prestigious as it is for us. It's a $30 million plus development. We're on the front page of Tulsa World. That all started with a cold introduction meeting that was set up by a friend of mine. So a friend of mine, Chris Myers, I think he's been on the podcast.
Yep. Great guy.
Great guy. He calls me to his office and says, hey, I got this guy. He's messing with something down in Bixby. He's looking for equity. And I'm like, well, we don't really partner with people. We don't really give people equity. But I took the meeting. That's the key, is I'm interested in what I can learn from the meeting and show up to the meeting. And there's this really nice guy from England there, Bob Eggleston. And so we need to have him on the podcast. But at the time, I don't know Bob. Bob's like, hey, there's this deal in Bixby. I even think we were looking at another property in Bixby not one we own now. And he was like, I got this guy that's out of town. He does my modeling for me. And so I'm like, okay, this guy doesn't do his own modeling. He's got this model. I don't understand the model.
He's British.
Well, I like British. I like British people. And so I'm just trying to wrap my head around, okay, well, what can I learn from this guy? What has he got going on? I was very unsure. But hey, we kept the dialogue going, and he was super friendly. And then I got my business partner involved, Victor, and he became really good friends with Bob, and we just kept pushing the relationship. Well, turns out that RFQ that we initially spoke on was delayed, and this other RFQ had a vacant lot came up first, and we ended up partnering with them. We ended up bidding on it. He introduced us to Red Dog Construction, who we're partnering with on the deal. And so from one cold meeting to a $30 million development in downtown Bixby, friendships with Bob, friendships with the Red Dog Construction Group. Now the whole trajectory of our development platform at Precision Equity all changed from that cold meeting that Chris Myers called me to. And so,
that's fantastic.
I know I always think about people just listening to the podcast, and I know people are listening and they're thinking, man, okay, who have I met? Who have I passed up on that could have been an influential contact for me?
Oh, yeah.
And so there's people that you may be thinking about listening that you may need to call back, that you may need to invest in.
Right.
Because once again, there's someone out there that knows the piece of information you're missing to change your life.
Yeah.
They're going to expand your knowledge base. They're going to have, and it may not even be them. It may be an uncle that they have that you need to meet. That's the key. That you're just, if you just knew that one person. For me, like on the debt guy, I didn't know agency debt, but I needed to know agency debt because agency debt was what was going to help me get low interest financing, cash out refis on my multifamily.
He was another member of the team.
Yeah, part of the team that you put together. And so part of being successful in life, this is not just real estate, it's life. Part of being successful in life is networking, making connections, but making people important enough to figure out what they know, what you don't know that they do, asking them about what they do and what connections they have.
That's such a good point. I remember real quick, we were on a conference. I think it was the IMN multifamily conference in Santa Barbara. And I was nervous and I was like, man, what do I do? And he's like, just go sit at that table and ask people questions. And it was just like this redefining moment of my life. I was like, oh man. And I really think it's almost binary now. I mean, there's people who will wait for people to ask them questions and they'll answer them and then they'll shut up and they won't say another thing. And then there's the people who are just asking everyone questions, trying to learn about them, starting conversations, saying, oh man, that's really cool. And eventually, if these people care and are interested at all, they'll ask you a question. They'll scratch that itch if you have it. But that's how the relationship is started, is by going up and saying, and I ask these guys all the time. I mean, I'm a question asker. If you're around me and you came up in some brand new Ferrari, I would be like, dude, gorgeous car. What the heck do you do? And how can I be a part of it? That is an amazing car. Or just anything in that respect. Man, that is a gorgeous building. How did you build that? I would love to pick your brain on it. Or I have people call me, pitch me deals. Hey, there's this mall I'd love for you to invest in. Well, it's like, first of all, no, but I'd love to look at it. Hey, there's this hotel I want you to invest in. probably not for me, but I love to look at it because I want to know. I'm not interested, but I'm not interested because I don't know enough yet. So if I knew what they knew and they know enough to pitch it to me, they believe in it. So if I could just try to figure out what they knew to pitch it to me, maybe I would be more comfortable with it. And you do that enough times, and then pretty soon, hotels and malls.
That's funny. People are making millions of dollars on hotels. There's hotel magnates. I never bought a hotel.
Yeah, we don't know how they.
But I don't know the secrets to making money at hotels. But people do.
Yeah.
One final example. I take Ubers. If I'm going to ever have a drink or two, I'm Ubering, and so I Uber there and I Uber back. And so I spend a lot of time talking to Uber drivers. And for me, it's really fun because I ask them a bunch of questions and I get to know people. I want to know where they're from. I want to know what their kids do. I want to know where they work, why they're driving the Uber, what's going on.
Their last name and social security number.
Yeah, no. I want to follow them home. But what I think is interesting sometimes is I'll have certain Uber drivers, they pull up to my house, they see I'm in a really big house, and they want to know about what I do. And I want to know about what they do. But then I'll have the occasional one where I'll ask them questions, and it's a 30-minute Uber ride. Let's say I'm going all the way downtown. And they won't stop talking about themselves, and they never once asked me one question, which is fine. I'm interested in them, but I just think here there's a potential for some back and forth, and I feel like they might be interested in real estate or how to make money or how to invest or whatever. But no, certain people, they're not thinking about what I can learn from people. They just want to tell me about
them,
their last 4 jobs and why they got fired and they're driving an Uber, which is fine. But they would serve themselves well, and we all would if we just take time to be the question asker at the conferences and not the guy talking about everything he's always done. Don't be the guy or the girl that's always telling everybody else what they're doing, because you're not learning anything when you're doing that.
Right.
Find out what they're doing. You'll learn from what they're doing, not from telling them about what you do.
Right.
Well, I think that was a great episode. I think people need to learn to, listen a little bit more, ask a little bit more questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions and really just lean in, because you could be one contact away from everything in your entire life changing for the better, essentially.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Alrighty.
All right.